Welcome. Our mission today is to do a comprehensive exploration of the sources surrounding the tragic 1993 murder of Polly Klaas. This material is, of course, incredibly sensitive, but it is absolutely vital for anyone who's seeking to understand the fundamental systemic shifts that took place in American criminal justice.
Right. And in child advocacy in the mid-90s.
Absolutely. So we're approaching this subject with the utmost respect for the victim and, of course, for her surviving family.
And that respect really informs our whole approach here. I mean, our goal is to move beyond just the devastating facts of the crime itself.
Yeah.
And instead to focus really intensely on the legal, the procedural, and the cultural legacy that resulted from it. We're using sources that detail everything from the immediate events to the trial and the huge legislative changes that followed.
Indeed. And just to provide some context for those who might only vaguely remember the events, Polly Klaas was just 12 years old. She was kidnapped from her home on October 1st, 1993, in Petaluma, California.
And she was subsequently murdered by Richard Allen Davis.
The impact of this case, it really can't be overstated. It acted as this incredibly powerful catalyst.
It really did. And we're going to be analyzing how this one singular, devastating event fundamentally reshaped not only local law enforcement response, but really national consciousness.
And that public pressure, it led directly to the creation of California's landmark three strikes law.
And it also forced some major structural changes in how law enforcement communicates during child abductions.
So if you're looking to understand the mechanics of how a public tragedy is channeled into legislative action, and often controversial action, this case provides one of the clearest historical examples.
It really does.
Let's start by carefully unpacking the timeline of events that set this whole movement in motion.
Okay.
To properly set the scene, we go to Petaluma, a quiet community in Sonoma County, California, in the fall of 1993. Polly Klaas, born January 3rd, 1981, was 12 years old.
And the night of October 1st was supposed to be completely normal, completely routine. She was having a slumber party with two close friends at her mother's home, Eve Nichols' home. Right.
The sources detail a really chilling scenario. It highlights how, routine safety measures were just completely bypassed by the randomness of the attacker.
And around 10:30 p.m., the killer, Richard Allen Davis, a career criminal who was highly intoxicated, entered the bedroom where the three girls were.
And the sources confirm this terrible opportunistic nature of his preparedness, or lack thereof. He entered the home unarmed.
Unarmed.
But he very quickly acquired a weapon. He took a knife directly from the home's kitchen.
That just underscores that his crime was one of, terrifying impulse and sudden invasion. It wasn't some premeditated targeting of this specific victim.
That opportunistic element is absolutely critical in understanding the public reaction that followed.
Yeah.
According to the witness accounts which are detailed in the sources, Davis tried to use this strange, false sense of calm. He told the girls he meant no harm and was only there for money.
But his actions immediately made that assurance meaningless.
The details of the abduction itself, as confirmed by the survivors, they established this agonizing timeline that investigators would later have to rely on.
Right. And the source material notes he acted very systematically to neutralize the witnesses. He first tied up both of Polly's friends, then he pulled pillowcases over their heads.
And this detail is just unforgettable.
Mm-hmm.
He instructed the two terrified friends to count to 1,000.
1,000.
Count to 1,000 before moving or calling for help. This act was designed, obviously, to ensure he had a significant head start.
And it was during this period of restraint, this enforced silence, that he kidnapped Polly Klaas from the room. I mean, the psychological impact of being forced to count while knowing your friend is being taken, you just can't overstate it.
It's unimaginable. The immediate aftermath then saw a community mobilization that was truly historic in its scale. It reflected this collective shock and desperation of the whole town of Petaluma.
Yeah, the response wasn't just emotional. It was a massive, organized effort that escalated really rapidly to national prominence.
I mean, the sources indicate that over the next 2 months, something like 4,000 different people participated in the search for Polly Klaas.
4,000 people.
It's a monumental civic effort. It's a testament not just to hope, but to a community's willingness to just pause everything for a single child.
And the search, it quickly consumed resources, not just locally, but from state and federal agencies. It turned into this high-profile national missing person case almost instantly.
But tragically, this immense community effort was hampered by a critical, systemic failure in law enforcement protocol. an issue that would later become a major point of reform.
That's right. And the sources, they really pinpoint a crucial operational failure in those critical early hours of the investigation. The initial all points bulletin, the APB,
Yeah.
for the missing child was broadcast only on the CHP, the California Highway Patrol radio channel.
And the crucial detail there is that the transmission and reception of that alert was limited solely to radios specifically tuned to that CHP frequency.
So think about the implication of that. I mean, a technical limitation with huge consequences.
Right.
Local police departments, sheriff's offices, other municipal agencies on their own frequencies. They didn't immediately get this crucial alert, or they got it late through secondary channels.
And in an abduction case, I mean, everyone knows the first few hours are the most critical.
They're everything. It's the window for finding the victim alive, for establishing roadblocks. This communication failure severely restricted the speed and the breadth of the search in that vital window.
That restriction just highlights how bureaucracy and, frankly, outdated technology directly hampered the immediate interagency response.
And as we know, the search did not have a happy resolution.
No, unfortunately not. After 2 grueling months, Davis was arrested on December 1st, 1993, but on unrelated charges.
Right. And the sources confirmed that the subsequent investigation led to a breakthrough when he guided police to the location of the body in Sonoma County.
And the recorded facts regarding her death, they confirmed the worst fears of the entire community. The time of death was placed on October 1st, 1993.
The very night of the abduction.
The very same night. With strangulation confirmed as the cause, her body was discovered on December 4th, buried in a shallow grave.
So those 2 months of desperate searching, fueled by 4,000 volunteers, it all ended in the confirmation of this profound tragedy. The confirmation of her death brought an end to the search, but it really catapulted the case into its next phase, the legal pursuit of justice, which was heavily influenced by the public's emotional investment.
So the transition now moves from the crime and the search efforts to the long, scrutinized legal repercussions and the convicted killer's subsequent provocative behavior.
Behavior that just intensified the public focus on what were perceived as the failings of the criminal justice system.
The trial of Richard Allen Davis, beginning several years later, it was one of the most highly anticipated and emotionally charged legal proceedings in California history.
Yeah, the sources accurately described the atmosphere surrounding the trial as long and tumultuous. It really reflected that national anger and the demand for absolute accountability.
The legal outcome was decisive. Davis was convicted on June 18, 1996, in San Jose Superior Court.
And the primary charge, as expected, was first-degree murder. But the prosecution was determined not just to secure a conviction. They wanted to ensure the severity of the sentence reflected the severity of the crime and the killer's history.
And for the legal experts listening, the critical component here, the thing that really paved the way for the death sentence, was the jury's finding of 4 specific special circumstances.
Right. These elevate the crime beyond a simple homicide.
So what were they?
The 4 special circumstances, and these are details recorded directly in the court documents, were murder committed during the commission of a robbery, a burglary, a kidnapping, and an attempted lewd act on a child.
So finding all of those multiple circumstances was crucial in satisfying the legal threshold for capital punishment.
Yes, and for demonstrating the prolonged, violent nature of the attack that night.
And based on these findings, the jury returned a sentence of death. But the legal proceeding reached this kind of fever pitch during the formal sentencing hearing. This is when Richard Allen Davis chose to use the courtroom not as a place for solemn accountability, but as a stage for blatant defiance.
And this specific incident is so critical to understanding the intensity of the public fury that fed into the legislative push that came later.
So what happened?
At his formal sentencing, Davis was captured on camera, extending both middle fingers at the courtroom camera.
That image was it was everywhere.
It was instantly circulated. It became a symbol of the killer's utter lack of remorse and his blatant disrespect for the institution of justice and for the suffering of the victim's family.
And his provocation? It escalated beyond just gestures. The court transcripts record that he further taunted the family by making a disturbing, completely unfounded statement.
Yes, he falsely claimed that Polly Klaas's final words before her death implied that her father had molested her.
It's vile.
And it's essential to understand this act as an intentional, malicious effort to inflict the maximum emotional damage on the family at the moment of his own condemnation.
Right. And we cite this detail, as recorded in the source material, purely to highlight the extreme extent of his courtroom disruption and provocation.
Absolutely. Without giving any legitimacy to the claim itself, it just cemented the public perception of him as this truly depraved individual who sought to hurt even while facing the ultimate penalty.
That extreme behavior, it really ensured that any marginal public debate regarding his fate just height, it vanished. And the response from the presiding judge was extraordinary. It reflected the immense emotional pressure the court was under.
That's a fascinating point about the judicial environment. I mean, it's rare to hear a judge express such personal intensity when delivering a formal sentence.
It really is.
It just underscores the unique public outrage surrounding this case. Judge Thomas Hastings formally sentenced Davis to death, but he added this powerful verbal condemnation.
What did he say?
The sources record that the judge explicitly told Davis that his disruptive and outrageous conduct in the courtroom made the decision to pass the death sentence significantly easier.
Wow. That comment confirms that the killer's behavior wasn't just offensive. It had a measurable effect on the official perception of his potential for rehabilitation or clemency.
And since that sentencing in 1996, Davis has remained on death row.
The conclusion of the criminal trial really marked the beginning of a massive push for reform. The family, meanwhile, sought a final private act of remembrance.
According to the sources, Klaas's body was cremated, her friends and her family scattered her ashes over the Pacific Ocean,
Providing a final, necessary, and private moment of farewell after years of intense public scrutiny and pain.
And with that trial concluded, the focus shifts entirely to the enduring effects of this case on policy and on public safety.
The legal and social legacy of the Polly Klaas case is perhaps more profound and far-reaching than the trial itself. This event served as a fulcrum for massive change across three domains: victim advocacy, law enforcement procedures, and fundamentally, American sentencing laws.
Let's start with the transition of Polly's father, Mark Klaas. He went from a grieving parent to this incredibly influential public figure.
He channeled his unimaginable grief into structured, enduring action. He became a tireless and highly visible child advocate in the wake of the murder.
And this shift wasn't just symbolic, it was institutional. He established the Polly Klaas Foundation, which was originally known as the Klaas Kids Foundation.
And this organization, it was built to provide immediate support and assistance to parents of other kidnapped children. It essentially created a structured resource where previously there had been only chaos and desperation.
The foundation's work has been very concrete and specific, reflecting the needs that they identified during the search for Polly. This included providing resources like child identification and fingerprint kits for parents,
Right.
lobbying vigorously for the widespread implementation of the AMR alert system, which was still really nascent in the 1990s,
It was, yeah.
and mobilizing trained search volunteers for other high-profile cases. His personal tragedy created a nationwide infrastructure for proactive child safety measures.
His role became central in the national dialogue about child safety. The sources list his extensive media presence on major programs like Larry King Live, CNN Headline News, Nancy Grace. He effectively used the visibility of his daughter's case to advocate for systemic change, becoming recognized as an authoritative voice on safety policy. He fundamentally changed how the public discusses missing children.
And moving from advocacy to procedure, the case exposed and corrected a vital practical failing in law enforcement communication that had likely cost critical time.
Right. We discussed the technical failing earlier, but the specifics are important to really understand the reform. The initial All Points Bulletin for Polly was broadcast only on the California Highway Patrol, the CHP, channel. At the time, that meant most municipal police departments were not routinely monitoring it.
The resulting delay in interagency communication, particularly between the Petaluma local police and broader state resources, was seen as just unforgivable.
The institutional learning curve here was immediate. Post-case, this communication structure was completely overhauled.
The radio system was upgraded, and emergency bulletins are now broadcast on all police channels through a centralized 911 dispatch system, or its equivalent, across the state.
And that guarantees immediate, widespread dissemination of crucial information to every patrol car. It corrected the procedural flaw that may have hindered the initial time-sensitive search.
This single policy change has likely saved lives by ensuring law enforcement can act as a single, coordinated unit in an emergency.
These reforms were crucial, but perhaps the most enduring and certainly the most controversial piece of legislation spurred by this case was the Three Strikes Law.
Absolutely. The fact that Richard Allen Davis was a repeat offender, a known criminal with previous convictions for kidnapping who had been repeatedly cycling through the penal system.
Mhm.
It created this overwhelming public demand for a law that would ensure he and others like him would never be released again.
And the political reaction was rapid and forceful, spurred by that public fear and anger. In California, the Three Strikes and You're Out Act was signed into law on March 8, 1994.
Just months after Polly's body was found.
Just months. The source material confirms that this case is widely recognized as the single most important catalyst for the establishment of the Three Strikes Law.
And this law fundamentally changed sentencing in California. It mandated exceptionally harsh sentences, often life imprisonment, for a third felony conviction.
Right.
Regardless of the relative severity of that third felony, the idea was simple and very appealing to the public. Incapacitate career criminals. If you strike 3 times, you're permanently removed from society.
But the policy itself, it quickly became a source of intense debate and criticism. And this is crucial for our listener to grasp. While it was intended to target violent career predators like Davis, its broad definition of what constituted a strikable offense led to significant long-term and sometimes unintended consequences.
Critics quickly pointed out the immense strain the law placed on the prison system. Mandatory minimum sentencing, especially life sentences, it drove prison overcrowding and inflated costs dramatically.
Right.
But more fundamentally, the law was criticized for creating disproportionate punishments.
For example, the sources and subsequent legal analysis, they detail cases where a minor, non-violent third felony, sometimes something like petty theft or drug possession, resulted in a 25 years to life sentence for someone who was not a violent predator. The spirit of the law, which was designed to prevent another Polly Klaas tragedy, became muddied by its rigid application to thousands of lower-level offenders.
Furthermore, studies examining the law's application showed that it disproportionately affected minority communities and increased racial disparities in sentencing and incarceration rates across California.
So the policy that promised justice for one victim resulted in a mass incarceration framework that remains highly controversial today.
And that highlights the ethical and practical difficulties of legislating in moments of intense emotional reaction.
The complexity of the Three Strikes legacy is precisely why this case remains so important. I mean, it is a textbook example of how a justifiable desire for public safety can lead to expansive legislation with profound, long-term systemic fallout.
Shifting to a more personal form of legacy, we should also acknowledge the connection to actress Winona Ryder, which brought additional visibility to the emotional aspects of the case.
Ryder, who grew up in Petaluma, was deeply affected and personally involved in the community effort. She used her platform to assist, offering a substantial $200,000 reward for Polly's safe return.
And that action significantly energized the financial support available to the search effort.
And that connection didn't end with the search. Ryder later dedicated the film version of Little Women, which was known to be Polly Klaas's favorite book, to her memory.
It's a powerful, personal way that the case intersected with popular culture. It ensured that the remembrance was tied to something the child loved, rather than just the horror of her death.
Finally, the community's commitment to creating lasting, tangible memorials is evidence of the permanent scar left by this tragedy.
Right. A performing arts center in Petaluma was named in her honor in October 1998. It was intended as a place of creativity and joy.
But maintaining a memorial like that proved difficult. The center faced immediate challenges, closing in 2000 due to building safety issues and funding shortages.
Which reflects the difficulty of translating emotional commitment into long-term financial viability.
Yet the story of the memorial itself demonstrates the community's dedication. After significant years of fundraising and building improvements, the Polly Klaas Community Theater was successfully reopened in November 2022.
That perseverance, spanning more than 2 decades, speaks volumes about the enduring desire in Petaluma to honor her memory through a positive cultural contribution.
Given the intense public and legislative impact, it's really no surprise that the Polly Klaas case became a cornerstone for the burgeoning true crime media industry.
It really served as a template for narratives concerning systemic failure and the need for retribution. The sources chronicle how this story has been consistently revisited and reanalyzed over the past 3 decades.
Early on, the focus was squarely on recidivism. American Justice aired an episode in 1996, Free to Kill, the Polly Klaas murder. And this program specifically framed the story around the challenges of the penal system in rehabilitating inmates. It detailed Richard Allen Davis's history of being in and out of jail with prior convictions for burglary and kidnapping.
And that narrative strongly reinforced the public justification for the newly passed three strikes law.
Right. Then 2 years later, in 1998, the FBI files used the Klaas case for its very first episode.
That show's focus was more procedural and forensic. It detailed the meticulous evidence collection and the large-scale search efforts carried out by the FBI agents.
So that type of coverage, it typically aims to reassure the public that, despite the tragic outcome, the investigative system is sophisticated and ultimately capable of apprehension.
Right. And the case continued to be leveraged in later media formats. Investigation Discovery reenacted the kidnapping and murder in 2014 for its series Motives and Murder, Cracking the Case,
Which demonstrates the enduring appeal of the narrative.
And even in contemporary digital media, its significance remains high. The popular Crime Junkie podcast released an episode in May 2022 that focused specifically on how the case set a precedent for California's three strikes law.
So it really cements its role not just as a historical crime, but as a critical moment in legal history that continues to shape current criminal justice discussions.
Absolutely. And most recently, the anniversaries of the law's passage have prompted further reflection. ABC aired an episode of 2020 called Taken in the Night in September 2023.
And ABC 7 News Bay Area aired a documentary in March 2024, Struck by Justice, The Impact of Polly Klaas, commemorating 30 years since the law was enacted.
This sustained media attention confirms that the legal ramifications are still being actively debated, studied, and judged.
So, while the media consistently returns to the crime, the trial, and the subsequent policy, the source material offers a crucial critical reflection on this entire process. A necessary viewpoint delivered by a primary survivor who experienced the full public spectacle.
This is the essential counter-narrative. It forces us to pause our analysis of policy mechanics and address the human cost of the media cycle. Polly Klaas's older sister, Annie Nickel, published a powerful guest essay in the New York Times in January 2024.
And the title itself is a thesis. My sister was murdered 30 years ago. True crime repackages our pain as entertainment.
Nickel's essay explicitly challenged the foundation of the true crime phenomenon. Her criticism focused heavily on the nature of the media coverage of the kidnapping. She argued that the constant recirculation of painful events effectively repackages the family's trauma for public consumption and entertainment, rather than serving a legitimate public function like education or prevention.
Crucially, she also offered a critical perspective on the legal aftermath, specifically raising problems inherent in the three strikes law that her sister's case catalyzed.
And her position is incredibly important because it reveals a division even within the victim community about whether the laws created in their name achieved genuine justice or simply contributed to a larger flawed system.
Her criticism echoes the legal arguments about the law's overly broad scope and its lasting negative impacts on vulnerable populations.
And in her writing, Nickel advocated for a significant shift in focus. She appealed to media and the public alike to be more attentive to helping survivors heal, rather than perpetually reinvestigating and narrating the trauma for commercial benefit.
Her viewpoint is a necessary injection of reality into any analysis of this case's legacy. It forces us to ask, how do we, as informed citizens and learners, balance the legitimate historical need to study the mechanisms of criminal justice reform, to understand exactly how landmark laws like three strikes came into being, with the imperative for ethical treatment and consideration of victims and their surviving family members, who must inevitably relive that pain through repeated coverage?
That tension really defines the ethical landscape of high-profile tragedy.
This complex reflection is vital because it reminds us that policy is not created in a vacuum. It emerges from profound human moments, and its impact is always felt most sharply by those nearest to the tragedy.
As we conclude this thorough analysis of the source materials, the murder of Polly Klaas stands as a pivotal event in modern American history, leaving an undeniable mark across multiple sectors.
Yeah, we can clearly synthesize the three major structural areas where this single case resulted in significant, lasting change.
First, the dramatic shift in law enforcement operational protocol. The failure of that limited CHP-only bulletin system directly led to the upgrading of the radio network and the establishment of the centralized 911 dispatch system.
All right, guaranteeing immediate, widespread interagency communication during critical emergencies across California.
Second, the case was the direct and recognized catalyst for a fundamental overhaul of sentencing laws with the establishment of the California Three Strikes Act in 1994.
This set a major national precedent for habitual offender legislation. It dramatically changed the landscape of criminal punishment and incarceration, a change whose complex legacy continues to be debated today.
Hmm. And third, the case formalized modern victim advocacy. Mark Klaas's dedication led to the establishment of the Polly Klaas Foundation.
Ensuring standardized resources, search mobilization, and structured support were available to other families facing similar crises. It really defined the modern, influential public role of the victim's advocate.
The enduring tension at the heart of the Polly Klaas legacy is a difficult one. How a singular, horrific personal tragedy became the driving force for massive, complex, and sometimes severely criticized policy changes.
It represents the perpetual, uneasy balance between the public demand for guaranteed safety through severe punishment and the ongoing need for systemic solutions and compassionate resolution.
We have meticulously tracked how the public outrage resulting from this murder led to the immediate passage of the Three Strikes Law. As you reflect on the long-term, complex impact of that legislation, and particularly on the survivor's critique, that the focus should shift away from trauma consumption and toward healing.
Yeah.
Consider this provocative thought. If the goal of the justice system in the wake of tragedy is truly comprehensive prevention and societal repair, what mechanisms beyond new and punitive sentencing laws might more effectively address the systemic issues highlighted by high-profile cases like this, while honoring the imperative to help survivors rebuild their lives?
Thank you for joining us for this extensive analysis of the source materials and the transformative legacy of the Polly Klaas case. Thanks for listening.